Good morning, Pastor Ron Jetter, Immanuel Lutheran Church, Grandview, Washington. Today is Saturday, the second day of the month of May, 2020. This week I have been looking at the Gospel of John, what its purpose is, who its author is. We looked at the heart of the story, the 3 days. We looked at Jesus' death, his resurrection, and his burial. We looked at the very beginning, and today then the end of the Gospel, and it's very curious. This gospel comes up during the Sundays in the season of Easter, so I don't want to say too much because you'll probably hear it again on a Sunday if you're with us at 10 a.m. live Zoom worship any Sunday. But we have this curious story in John that shows that there may have been some tension between the author of this gospel, who refers to himself as the beloved disciple. We believe that to be John, the younger brother of James, one of the sons of Zebedee, the fisherman, who along with Simon and Andrew were part of this Capernaum fishing village. And Peter and John have no doubt known each other their entire lives. But we have this story of, in verse 15, Jesus reinstating Peter. When they had finished eating, well, right there that tells us they were eating again. So Jesus, very much alive, at the end now of his resurrection visits to the disciples back in Galilee, they were eating fish on a charcoal fire. As they finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Jesus asks him this question 3 times, and Simon Peter understands, because I denied you 3 times, now I have to proclaim my love and my faith and my total obedience for you 3 times. So then Jesus does finally say to him, very truly I tell you, in verse 18, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands. Someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me." And Peter took that literally and, according to tradition, was crucified. Peter turned and saw that the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. This was the one who had leaned back against Jesus at the supper and said, "Lord, who's going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he said, "Lord, what about him?" As if to say, Peter's asking, well, how about John? How's he going to die? Jesus answered, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me." So, it's Jesus' way of saying, Peter, none of your business. Pay attention to what I've asked you to do. You've agreed to do it. Now be faithful to me. I am the Lord your God. Follow me. Obey me. And don't get distracted with what other people are doing. Stay focused on your ministry. It doesn't matter. And he adds this curious statement, if he's still alive when I come back, that's none of your business, Peter. Because of this, the rumor spread among the believers that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say that he would not die. He only said, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you?" So John has lived with this kind of burden over his head, this rumor that he's somehow now immortal. And here he is, no doubt, writing these things down because he realizes he's going to die soon, that his death is imminent. He's an old man, and he's got to get this story down. This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true. He's referring to himself. My testimony's true. I know it's true. You know it's true. Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that could be written. That's it. The last verse of the Gospel of John. Jesus doesn't walk off into the sunset. In the Synoptics, remember, he gives them the Great Commission, a different version of it in each of them. But in Luke, we have then Luke saying, okay, this is the story of Jesus. Now, Theophilus, read the next book, which we know as the book of Acts, in which Luke takes up the sequel. Okay, what happened after Jesus ascended? The Holy Spirit came down 10 days later. 40 days after the resurrection, Jesus ascended. 50 days after the resurrection, the Spirit descended, and the church was born. Luke tells both of those stories, the story of Jesus, the story of the church in the Acts of the Apostles. That's why we often refer to Luke as Luke Acts, because it is a 2-volume work by the one author. Mark has the very simple Great Commission of Jesus, and Matthew, it's a little bit longer, but it's basically go and make disciples of all nations. And here, it's much more personal, Jesus reinstating Peter and saying, you, Peter, you have a job to do. Pay attention to your job. Don't bother what I've told any of these others to do. That's none of your business. And it's interesting that John records this detail as though, like I say, there could have been some tension within the early church. We know that Peter was proclaimed the leader of the church, and then John's older brother James became the leader, and then the other James became the leader. It's possible at one point that some of the women were leaders of the church, but in spite of Saint Peter being the namesake of the world's largest church, the Basilica in the Vatican in Rome, Peter really wasn't the head of the church for all that long. Peter had some issues. He was stubborn. There's one place in the book of Acts where Luke refers to this council at which Peter and Paul were discussing things. And they came to this agreement about ministering to the Gentiles. Well, Paul, in his writings, says, I came to Jerusalem to meet, and I opposed him to his face. He was wrong. In other words, it sounds like Peter really saw his mission as to Jews, to convert Jews to believe in Jesus as the Jewish Messiah. And he didn't understand that Paul's mission was specifically to the Gentiles, to those outside of Judaism, or to some, the Jews that were in the Greek lands, but not to stay in the Holy Land, not to stay in the Jewish territory. And here we have then in the Gospel of John this reference to Jesus having to reinstate Peter. It's not in any of the other Gospels, the reinstatement of Peter. The denial, yes, Peter 3 times would deny Jesus. We've got that. But only the Gospel of John has Jesus now undoing the power of the guilt of that denial. And Peter has to go through some personal shame. He's excited that Jesus is alive, that he's resurrected from the dead. And he's ashamed at how he behaved before the crucifixion. And now he's been reinstated. He's had a job to do. And he's told, focus. Pay attention to what I have asked you to do, Peter. Well, focus is hard these days for a lot of us. There's so many. I make lists of things that I can get done around the house, and I don't want to do them too fast because we were told by Governor Jay Inslee of the state of Washington just yesterday that we are now under stay-at-home orders for the entire month of May, that until we can see that flattening of the curve, unless we're one of the 10 counties that really don't have any significant presence of COVID-19, we have to stay put. Yakima County leads the state in per capita. We have 3% of the population, but we have 7% of the COVID-19 cases and 6% of the deaths. So we are way, way out of proportion in Yakima County. We got to get it under control. We get that. And as the leader of a church, I am responsible for making sure that we continually have ways to be spiritually fed and ways to gather together while still remaining safe and within the law. Thanks. I'll see you in church tomorrow morning.